Yuanda's knees hit the dirt just as the plastic bowls burst open around her hot stew and rice, bleeding across the crowded market road. Laughter rose before she could even breathe. Jide stood over the ruined food with a polished shoe still pressed into one crushed container, his rich fiancée Morayo laughing at his side. "Look at you," he said loud enough for the whole market to hear. "You once dreamed of being my wife. Now you sell food in smoke and sweat just to keep your family alive." Yuande's fingers trembled as she reached for the spilled food, then a black luxury car stopped beside the stall, and the man inside stared at her like he already knew her name. "Before we go on, tell me honestly, if someone who once broke your heart publicly humiliated you at your lowest point, would you stay silent, or make sure they lived to regret it? And tell me, what country are you watching from, and what's your local time right now? If you love powerful emotional stories with shocking twists and satisfying endings, subscribe and stay with us for the rest of this journey." The market always woke before the sun. By 4 in the morning, Yuand was already standing over a charcoal stove in the narrow courtyard behind their rented room, fanning smoke away from her face with a cracked tray. The air smelled of pepper onion oil and damp earth. Her wrapper was tied tightly around her waist. Her eyes were red from too little sleep, but her hands never stopped moving. She stirred one pot, turned the bean cakes in hot oil, checked the rice, counted the boiled eggs, wrapped fresh bread in old newspaper. Every movement was quick, measured, practiced. This was not just cooking. It was survival with fire under it. Inside the room, Mama Bisola coughed. The sound cut through the morning like a knife. Yuanda lowered the heat at once and hurried inside. The room was small enough that 3 steps took her from the stove to the bed. Her mother lay propped against flattened pillows, her skin shining with sweat, her breathing shallow and uneven. The medicine on the wooden stool beside her was almost gone. So was the money. "Easy, Mama," Yuand whispered, kneeling beside her. "Don't try to sit up too fast." Mama Bisola forced a faint smile. "You should already be at the market. I am not leaving until you drink this." She lifted a cup of warm water to her mother's lips and waited until she swallowed. Then she adjusted the thin blanket around her shoulders, though the morning was already warm. Illness had changed everything in that room. It had made time feel expensive. It had made silence heavy. It had made every cough sound like a warning. From the corner, a schoolbook snapped shut. "I'm ready," Korede said. Yuande turned. Her younger brother sat on a low stool in his faded uniform socks, unmatched exercise book balanced on one knee. He was trying to look older than his years, trying not to look scared, trying and failing at both. She gave him a tired smile. "Come and eat first." He stood but did not move toward the food. "Did the pharmacist say anything yesterday?" The question hung between them. Yuande reached for the bowl and kept her face calm. "He said Mama needs to continue the treatment. That is not what I asked." She paused. Korede stepped closer, his voice lowering. "How much do we still owe?" Too much, she thought. Enough to break a family already bent almost in half. But she only said, "I will handle it." His jaw tightened. "You always say that. And I always do." He looked away, ashamed of his own helplessness. That hurt Yuand more than the question itself. Korede was bright. Too bright for the life pressing down on him. He should have been worrying about exams, not hospital bills. He should have been sleeping late like other boys his age, not memorizing prices of medicine and pretending not to notice when the soup got thinner at night. Yuand handed him bread and egg. "Eat, then go to school. And no fighting this time." He gave a weak snort. "I only fight people who deserve it. That includes half your class." "That is because half my class is stupid." Despite everything, she laughed. Just once, softly. For a moment, the room felt human again. Then Mama Bisola began coughing harder, and the moment shattered. By sunrise, Yuand was in the market. Her stall was not really a stall. Just a wooden table patched with old nails, a metal tray, 2 plastic buckets, a cooler, and one faded umbrella that leaned to one side like it had also grown tired of struggling. Around her the market swelled with noise. Women calling prices, babies crying on backs, motorcycle engines choking the air, men dragging sacks through muddy water, radios fighting each other from 3 directions at once. Yuand lifted her chin and started serving. 2 bean cakes, 1 rice, add pepper, no pepper change for 5,000. She moved through the chaos like she belonged to it. Because she did. Her fingers were fast. Her voice was respectful. Her face remained steady, even when customers snapped at her or haggled as if she were not already barely making anything. She smiled when she had to. She swallowed anger when she had to. She gave exact change. She remembered regulars. She stretched kindness farther than money. Mid-morning, Iya Alake appeared. The old woman leaned on a walking stick and shuffled toward the stall with slow, careful steps. Her wrapper was clean, but worn thin. Her slippers looked ready to split. "Yuand," she said, her voice dry as paper. "You have something small for me today." Yuand looked at the coins in the woman's palm. Not enough. Not even close. Without hesitation, she filled a bowl anyway. Rice. A little stew. 1 bean cake, extra crisp the way the old woman liked it. Iya Alake blinked. "But I did not give you enough. You gave me what you had." The woman stared at her for a long second. "And if I have nothing tomorrow, then you will still eat." Emotion flickered across the old woman's face, but she hid it quickly. Pride did not disappear with poverty. It only learned to stand straighter. "God is watching you, child," she murmured. Yuand smiled faintly. "Then I hope he sees me working hard." From across the stall, a man in a pressed shirt paused as if he had heard that. He was buying bottled water from another vendor, but his eyes lingered on Yuand a second too long before he turned away and walked on. She noticed him only because he did not look like he belonged in that part of the market. She forgot him almost immediately. The day dragged. Heat built under the umbrella. Smoke clung to her hair and skin. Her lower back ached. Her feet burned. By noon she had sold most of the rice, but not enough drinks. By 1, 2 customers argued over who had been there first. By 2, a schoolboy tried to run without paying, and she chased him half a lane before he dropped the bread and fled. By 3, she counted the day's money, and knew with 1 glance that it still would not be enough. Not for medicine, not for rent due in 5 days, not for school fees that Korede pretended not to worry about. She closed her fist over the notes so tightly, the edges cut her palm. Later, when the rush thinned, 2 women from the fabric stall nearby began talking loud enough for her to hear. "That was him yesterday, wasn't it? Who that fine one? The one with the rich fiancé?" Yuand kept packing takeaway bowls, eyes lowered. The second woman clicked her tongue. "That man has no shame. To disgrace a woman like that in public." The first woman laughed bitterly. "Men like him always come back when life humbles them. Not that one. He looks like the kind who would drown and still ask if his clothes were expensive." They both laughed. Yuanda did not. The words pressed on an old bruise. Because they did not know everything. They did not know how Jeed had once stood in this very same market, sweaty and hungry and desperate, asking her for bus fare because he had missed another job interview. They did not know how she had believed in him when everyone else called him a drifter, how she had hidden food for him, how she had sat with him after his father threw him out, how she had sold the small gold earrings left by her own father to help him register for a certification program he claimed would change his life. It had changed his life, just not with her in it. As evening approached, a group of young men gathered by a nearby kiosk laughing over something on a phone screen. One of them looked over at Yuand, then another, then another. A strange chill crawled over her skin. "Is that not her?" one of them said. "The food seller." "The same one." The one holding the phone grinned. Someone posted the video already. Her stomach dropped. Video. She did not need to ask which one. Morayo, of course. Yuande turned away, but their laughter followed her like thrown stones. She could feel the phone cameras now, feel curiosity moving through the market in ripples, feel humiliation changing shape. and becoming public property. What had happened yesterday was no longer just a wound. It was entertainment. She served the next customer with shaking hands. By the time she packed up after sunset, she felt scraped hollow. The walk home was long. The road was crowded. Danfo buses groaned past in smoke. Hawkers moved between cars with plantain chips and phone chargers and sachet water. Evening prayers drifted from a mosque nearby. Somewhere someone was playing high-life music loud enough to distort the singer's voice. Life went on. That was the cruelest thing about suffering. It did not stop the world. It only isolated the person carrying it. When she reached home, Korede was outside under a weak bulb reading from his notebook. He stood at once when he saw her face. What happened? Nothing. That is a lie. Yuanda set down the basin of unsold items and leaned against the wall for 1 second. Only one. Then she straightened. I said it is nothing. He stared at her, then at the basin, then at the way her hands would not stop trembling. Inside, Mama Bisola stirred weakly. Yuand. Her daughter inhaled, wiped her face, and answered in a steady voice she did not feel. I'm here, Mama. From the shadows across the narrow street, a parked car remained still with its lights off. Inside it, a man watched the small house in silence while his driver waited. In the front seat, an investigator closed a folder and said quietly, Her name is Yuanda Akinola. Everything we found matches. She has been carrying that family alone for almost 3 years. The man in the back seat did not speak at first. Then he looked once more at the dim room, at the silhouette of the girl who had fed strangers while starving herself, and said, Keep digging. The investigator hesitated. Into the ex-boyfriend, too. The man's expression hardened, especially him. The first time Jeed had ever called Yuanda his future wife, he had no money in his pocket and dust on both shoes. It was raining that day, not the soft kind, the hard Lagos kind that turned roads into brown rivers and sent everyone running beneath torn awnings and overcrowded kiosks. Yuand still remembered the way he had stood outside her mother's doorway, soaked to the skin trying to smile through humiliation. I know how this looks, he had said. It looked like hunger, failure, pride hanging by a thread. At the time, she had loved him for showing up anyway. Now, walking back into that memory, she wondered if the boy at her mother's door had ever been real at all. That evening, after returning home from the market and discovering that Morayo's video had already begun spreading, Yuanda sat beside the single window in their room and counted the day's earnings again. Then again. As if the notes might somehow multiply out of pity. They did not. Korede sat on the floor nearby pretending to do homework, though his pencil had not moved in several minutes. Mama Bisola slept lightly, one hand curled against her chest, her breathing uneven but calmer than it had been the night before. The room was dim. The only sound was the scratch of insects against the tin roof and the distant throb of music from another compound. Yuand smoothed the wrinkled notes on her lap. Medicine first, then food, then transport. Then maybe if there was mercy left in the universe, she could begin touching the debt that had been crouching on her neck for months like a creditor with no face. Only now it had a face. Jide's. She could not prove it yet. But every document she had seen, every signature she did not remember making, every repayment message sent to her old phone number, every threat from loan officers who claimed she was lying, all of it led back to one season of her life. The season when she still believed love meant sacrifice, and that sacrifice would be remembered. Korede finally broke the silence. Was it him Yuanda did not look up? Who Jide? His name felt dirty in the room. She folded the money into a cloth purse. Do your work. So it was him. Her jaw tightened. Korede threw his pencil down. Why do you never say anything? Everybody knows what he did. The whole area talks. He used you. He left you. He insulted you in public. And now there is this debt. Why do you keep acting like silence is strength, that one landed? Yuanda turned to him slowly. Because noise does not pay hospital bills. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because anger does not bring food. Still nothing. And because if I let myself break every time life gave me reason to, there would be nobody left standing in this family. The words came out harder than she intended. Koreide's face changed at once. He looked ashamed, then guilty for looking ashamed. Yuanda exhaled and softened her tone. I am not defending him. Then why not fight him? Because men like Jaide do not fight fair. Koreide stared at the floor. I hate him. Yuanda looked away toward her sleeping mother. That makes two of us. But hate she knew was not the whole truth. The whole truth was uglier. Because before she hated him, she had once built little hopes around him, like a woman building a house out of dry leaves, knowing wind existed but praying it would pass her by. Years earlier, Jaide had not been polished. He had not worn imported cologne or shiny watches or those pointed shoes that announced themselves before he entered a room. He had been restless, charming, desperate, and painfully ambitious. The kind of man who spoke about the future as if it were an appointment only he could see. He used to visit her stall before sunrise, back when the stall was smaller and her father was still alive. Just give me 1 more month, he would say. You will see. 1 more month became 3. Then 6. Then a year. His schemes changed. His promises did not. 1 week it was a training program. The next it was a contact in Abuja. Then someone's cousin who knew someone in a bank. Then a business plan that only needed a little support to become the breakthrough. And Yuanda had supported him. God, how she had supported him. When he could not pay transport to attend an interview, she gave him the money from her own savings tin. When his landlord locked him out, she brought him food wrapped in foil and met him behind a mechanic shop so his shame would stay private. When he wanted to register for a certification course, she sold the only gold earrings her father had bought her before his illness worsened. He had cried when he found out. Actually cried. No one has ever believed in me like this, he had whispered, taking her hands and pressing them to his forehead. I swear to you, Yuanda, the day I rise, I will rise with you. The memory made her stomach turn, because she had believed him. Because she remembered exactly how his voice had sounded when he lied best low, tender, wounded, grateful, like sincerity wearing borrowed clothes. The next morning, Yuanda rose before dawn again. The body could be humiliated and still wake to responsibility. That was the cruelty of adulthood. She cooked in silence, checked on Mama Bisola, left food for Koreide. Then, before going fully to the market, she made a detour. The loan office sat above a pharmacy in a concrete building stained by rain and age. A flickering signboard buzzed above the stairwell. The receptionist at the desk barely looked at her before asking for an account number. Yuanda slid the paper across. The woman typed. Paused. Typed again. Then raised one eyebrow. You are overdue. I know. Very overdue. I said I know. The woman clicked her tongue and turned the screen slightly away. There was also an attempted restructuring 6 months ago. Yuanda froze. By who? Excuse me, who requested it? The receptionist shrugged. We only have the submission record. Not everyone comes physically. Can I see it? No. Yuanda leaned closer. Please, I just need to know whether— Madame, this is not your father's house. The humiliation was small compared to what she had already endured, but it still burned. Yuanda swallowed it and lowered her voice. Was it approved? No. Signature mismatch. Her pulse jumped. Signature mismatch. So somebody tried to change the repayment structure, she said slowly, using my name. The receptionist gave her a long, irritated look, then checked something else. There is a contact number attached to that request. Yuanda's hands tightened over the edge of the desk. Can I have it? No. Please? The woman sighed the sigh of someone reluctantly choosing humanity. She tore a small piece of scrap paper from a used notepad, scribbled digits, and slid it across. Yuand looked down. She knew the number. Even before her mind accepted it, her body did. Jeed. Not his current number. An older one. But his. For 1 second the room tilted. She saw his face, younger, smiling, telling her, "It is only until I stand on my feet." She saw herself counting money into his palm. She saw her father coughing blood into a cloth, while she pretended not to notice because there were too many emergencies in one house already. And now this. Not just emotional betrayal. Not just public humiliation. Fraud. She folded the paper carefully, as though careful hands might prevent violent thoughts. The receptionist frowned. "You know the number." Yuande's voice came out flat. "Yes." On her way down the stairs, the air felt too thin. Outside, traffic roared. Hawkers shouted. Someone somewhere was frying plantain. Life once again refused to pause for revelation. Yuande stopped beneath the awning and called the number anyway. Switched off. She called again. Still off. Of course. Men like Jide never stayed reachable when truth came looking for them. At the market, work blurred. She sold mechanically, her mind split in two. One half counted plates and change, the other replayed old scenes now coated in new meaning. Had he started using her name while he was still with her, before Morayo, before money changed his clothes and his accent and his appetite for cruelty? Or had he always seen her as useful before he ever saw her as loved near noon he appeared, not alone? Jeed never arrived alone anymore. He moved with company now, as though witnesses were part of the costume. 2 sharply dressed friends walked beside him, laughing at something one of them had said. Jide wore dark sunglasses despite the cloud cover. His shirt was crisp, his beard trimmed to perfection. Expensive watch. Controlled swagger. He stopped in front of the stall and removed the glasses slowly. Yuand kept serving a customer. "1 rice, 1 stew," the woman said, pretending not to notice the tension thickening the air. Yuande packed it. Jeed smiled. "You will not greet me." She handed the customer her food. "That will be 1,500. The woman paid and hurried away. Jide leaned one elbow on the stall like he belonged there, still angry. Yuanda looked at him then. Really looked. He was handsome. That had always been true. But handsomeness had curdled on him. It now looked like something sharpened for selfish use. "You used my name," she said. His smile flickered. Just once. Then came back. "I do not know what you are talking about. You forged a repayment request. Careful. You took loans in my name." His friends exchanged quick glances. Jide chuckled, but it sounded rehearsed. "This is a market, Yuand, not a courtroom. Lower your voice, answer me." Or what? Her breathing went shallow. Jide leaned closer, his tone dropping. "You really want to do this in public?" That sentence told her everything. Not innocence, not confusion, strategy. He was already calculating what could be denied, what could be twisted, what could be turned back against her. "I supported you," she said, the words slipping out before pride could stop them. "When you had nothing." Jeed's eyes cooled. "And there it is. The real problem. You still think helping someone gives you ownership." Yuanda stared at him in disbelief. "You begged me for help," she whispered. "And you gave it willingly." His voice hardened. "Do not act like I held a knife to your throat." The cruelty of it was almost elegant. Take the sacrifice. Rewrite the history. Blame the giver. One of his friends shifted uncomfortably, but Jide did not stop. "You poor girls always do this," he said. "You confuse pity with investment. Then when a man moves on, you call it betrayal." The market noise around them seemed to retreat. Yuand could hear only him, only the blood pounding in her ears, only the sound of something final cracking inside her. Then from somewhere behind the gathering crowd, a quiet male voice said, "Interesting." Jide turned. So did Yuand. A black car had stopped at the edge of the lane. and the man stepping out of it looked like he had not come to buy food this time. The market changed when powerful people entered it. Noise did not disappear. It bent. Voices lowered, eyes followed. Vendors who normally shouted prices suddenly found reasons to whisper. Even the men loading sacks onto wheelbarrows slowed down just enough to look. The stranger from the car stepped fully into the muddy lane with the calm of a man who had never needed permission to occupy space. He wore no flashy jewelry, no bodyguards pushed ahead of him. His dark shirt was simple expensive only to those who knew how to recognize expensive things. His watch was understated. His face was composed. But authority clung to him anyway. It sat in the straightness of his shoulders, in the way his gaze moved once and took in everything in the silence that formed around him before anyone understood why. Ewan felt it before she understood it. Jide did too. He straightened. Not from respect. From instinct. The man stopped in front of the stall and looked first at the spilled tension between them, then at Yuan, then at Jide. "Please," he said mildly. "Continue. You were saying something about poor girls confusing pity with investment." Jide's face shifted. Not fear. Not yet. But discomfort unmistakable and quick. "This is a private conversation," Jide said. The man nodded once. "And yet you chose a public market." One of Jide's friends gave an awkward laugh that died almost immediately. Yuanda's fingers tightened around the serving spoon in her hand. The stranger's tone was not loud. It did not need to be. It had that dangerous softness some men carried when they were completely certain of themselves. Jide forced a smile. "Sir, with respect, this has nothing to do with you." The stranger glanced at the bowl of rice still on the table, then at the scorched aluminum pot beside it. "I bought food here yesterday, so I would say this place at least has a little to do with me." Then he turned to Yuan. "One plate," he said. The request was so ordinary, it broke the tension for half a second. Yuan stared at him. "What, one plate of rice, stew on the side, and 2 bean cakes?" She blinked once, then moved automatically. Spoon, rice, stew, bean cakes. Her hands were steady only because years of labor had trained them to keep working even when her mind was racing. Jide watched in disbelief. "You interrupted this to buy lunch?" The man looked at him again. "No. I interrupted this because I dislike men who mistake a woman's restraint for weakness." Silence hit. Thicker this time. Someone behind them muttered, "Eh." Jide laughed too sharply. "You do not know the full story." "Then tell it." The smile vanished from Jide's face. For a moment Yuan almost pitied him. Almost. Because she recognized the look that entered his eyes now. It was the look of a man who suddenly sensed the room had tilted away from him, but had not yet figured out why. He adjusted his cuff. "My former relationship with this woman is complicated." "Complicated," the man repeated. "Yes. And the debt in her name." Jide froze. Yuande felt her heartbeat slam against her ribs. He knows, she thought. But how Jide recovered quickly, though not quickly enough. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The stranger took the plate Yuande offered him and placed a few folded notes on the table. "Far too much." Yuan immediately pushed part of it back. "It is too much." He looked down at the notes, then back at her. "Keep the change." "No." A flicker crossed his face. Interest. Approval. Something close to surprise, though smaller than surprise and sharper. "It is too much," Yuan repeated. "I do not collect what I did not earn." Behind her, one of the women from the neighboring stall made a quiet sound in her throat. Half admiration, half worry. The stranger held Yuan's gaze for 1 second longer, then nodded and took back the extra amount without offense. "Fair enough." Jide stared between them. "You are making a scene over nothing." The stranger tasted a spoonful of rice, chewed, swallowed, then said, "No. You made a scene. I am only trying to understand why a man dressed like success sounds so frightened of a food seller." That one landed cleanly. A few people in the crowd snorted. Jide's face hardened at once. "I am not frightened of anyone," he said. "Good," the stranger replied. "Then answering a simple question should not trouble you." Jide's voice cooled. "And who exactly are you to question me?" The man dabbed one corner of his mouth with a napkin Yuanda had placed beside the plate. Even that movement looked deliberate. "My name is Tunda. Just Tunda. Nothing more." Jide waited as if expecting the name to explain itself. It did not. Tunda set the plate down and leaned one hand lightly on the stall. "Now." "About that debt." Jide let out a short breath through his nose. "If she told you some sad story that is between us." Yuanda spoke before she could stop herself. "I saw the number used in the restructuring request. It was yours." Jide turned on her instantly. "And you believe that proves what?" "It proves you lied. It proves you are desperate." The old humiliation rose again, hot and bitter, but this time something held it in place. Not because it hurt less, because Tunda was watching, and under that gaze, Jide's tactics suddenly looked smaller. Cheap. Obvious. Tunda's expression did not change. "Did you borrow under her name? No. Did you authorize anyone else to know? Did you benefit from any loan linked to her documents?" Jide's jaw flexed. "I do not answer questions from strangers. Smart men do when the stranger is the one deciding whether their next week is easy or unpleasant." That sentence moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Jide frowned. Really frowned now. His friends had stopped pretending this was amusing. Yuand saw one of them glance toward the parked car, then toward the driver waiting beside it, then back at Tunda with the dawning discomfort of recognition. Too late. Jide noticed it too. Something in his face shifted again. He looked more carefully at Tunda, at the shirt, the watch, the car, the composure, then at the driver, then back. His confidence thinned by one invisible layer. "Have we met?" Jide asked cautiously. Tunda picked up another bean cake. "Not officially." That answer did not help. Yuanda said nothing. She could feel the moment stretching, tightening, becoming something larger than an argument at a market stall. A small boy squeezed between two women to stare openly at Tunda's car. Another vendor whispered a name. Someone else whispered it back, uncertain. The rumor had not fully formed, but it was moving. Tunda took one more bite, then looked at Yuanda. "How often do you feed people who cannot pay?" The question came so suddenly she blinked. "What I asked, how often?" Yuand glanced at Iya Alake's empty bowl still sitting at one edge of the table waiting to be washed. "As often as I can." "Why?" "Because hunger does not become less painful just because someone is poor." Tunda nodded slowly, as if storing the answer somewhere. "And if you had the chance," he asked, "to leave all this behind tomorrow, the smoke, the insults, the debt, the struggle, what would you be willing to trade for it?" Jide let out a short laugh. "Now that is a good question." But Yuand did not answer quickly. The market seemed to hold still with her. She looked at the charcoal stains on her own fingers, at the stack of takeaway bowls, at the sweat on the faces around her, at the worn edge of her table polished smooth by years of work. Then she looked at Tunda. "I would trade sleep," she said quietly. "Comfort, pride sometimes, even joy if life insisted." Tunde's eyes did not leave hers. "But not my dignity," she finished, "and not my conscience." The answer landed differently than the earlier ones. Even Jide felt it. His mouth curled. Big words from someone standing in a gutter. Tunda turned his head just enough to look at him. "Do you always confuse environment with worth?" Jide snapped. "You are talking like a preacher. This is real life." "Yes?" Tunde said. "That is exactly why character matters." The line was simple, but it cut. Jide had no comeback ready this time. Instead, he switched direction the way cowards did when truth began cornering them. He laughed and spread his hands as if the whole exchange bored him. This is ridiculous. Yuand likes drama. She has always liked making herself look like a victim. Something cold passed through Yuand. There it was. The old method. Take what he had done. Put it in her mouth. Wear innocence like a suit. Tunda studied him for a long second. Then he reached into his pocket and removed a card. Not to give to Jide. To give to Yuand. She stared at it. It was heavy cardstock. Cream. Minimal print. A name. A number. Nothing else. Tunda Afolayan, it read. For 1 second the market disappeared. Yuanda looked up so fast her neck hurt. No. It could not be. But it was. The name had weight in the city. In the country. In boardrooms, headlines deal rumors, charity galas, and entire neighborhoods built under corporate contracts. Even people who had never seen his face knew the name. Jide saw it too. The blood drained from his face. One of his friends took an involuntary step backward. Tunda Afolayan slid the card fully into Yuanda's hand and closed her fingers over it gently. If your mother's condition worsens, he said, his voice low enough for only her and the nearest listeners to hear, call that number directly. Yuanda could not speak. Tunde straightened and finally gave Jide the full force of his attention. As for you, he said, I suggest you remember every word you said here today. One day very soon you may need to explain them. Then he turned and walked back toward the car. Nobody stopped him. Nobody even breathed properly until the door shut behind him. The engine started. The car rolled away. And only when it disappeared beyond the end of the lane did the market explode into noise. Jide snatched off his sunglasses. How do you know him? Yuand looked down at the card in her palm, then at the road where the car had vanished. For the first time in a long time, fear and hope arrived together. I don't, she whispered. But somewhere deep inside, she knew that was no longer true. K to the question 4, TPT CUCUVT did 1000 to 1200, Theo Quai DNH. Thought for a couple of seconds. PHN 5. That night, hope arrived in the most dangerous form possible. Not as certainty. Not as rescue. As a business card resting beneath Yuanda's pillow like a secret she was afraid to believe in. She had read the name so many times the letters no longer looked real. Tunda Afolayan. Even now, hours after the market had emptied and the last pots had been washed, her mind still rejected the fact that a man like that had stood in front of her stall, eaten her food, and spoken to Jide as if Jide were an inconvenience rather than a threat. But disbelief changed nothing. Mama Bisola was still sick, Korede still needed school fees, and the debt still existed no matter whose card lay hidden in the dark. Yuan sat on the edge of the bed listening to the ceiling fan rattle uselessly above them. The blades were too slow to cool the room. Sweat clung to the back of her neck. Outside, dogs barked in the distance. Somewhere nearby, a generator coughed and roared to life. Korede was already asleep on the mat. Or pretending to be. Mama Bisola was not. Mama Yuanda whispered. Her mother turned her head weakly on the pillow. Even in the dim light, her face looked thinner than it had a week ago. You have been sitting there too long, Mama Bisola murmured. Your thoughts are louder than the fan. Yuanda tried to smile. Then the fan should be ashamed. Her mother gave the smallest laugh, then winced, as the laugh turned into a cough. Yuand rose immediately and helped her sit up. She held the cup to her lips, waited until she drank. Mama Bisola touched her daughter's wrist. You saw him again? Yuanda's eyes lifted. Who the man from the black car? Nothing escaped mothers. Not even sick ones. Yuanda sat back down slowly. Yes. Mama Bisola watched her carefully. And there is no and. He bought food. He asked questions. That is all. That is not all. Yuanda looked away. The older woman's voice grew quieter. A powerful man does not step into a place like that twice for no reason. That sentence slid under Yuanda's skin because it echoed her own thoughts too closely. She reached for the folded card beneath the pillow and turned it over once in her fingers. Mama Bisola noticed immediately. A card Yuand hesitated, then handed it to her. Even in the low light, recognition flared in the older woman's eyes. Afolayan, she breathed. Yuand stared. You know the name. Everybody knows the name. No. I mean, you know it. Mama Bisola went still. For one long second, too still. Then she handed the card back. Rich men build their names so large that even poor people must live in their shadow. It was an answer, but not a full one. Yuanda felt it. Before she could press further, Mama Bisola's body suddenly jerked forward with a brutal cough. Then another. Then another. The cup slipped from Yuanda's hand and hit the floor. Mama! A wet, broken sound tore from her mother's chest. Korede sat bolt upright on the mat. Mama, in seconds the whole room turned to chaos. Yuanda held her mother upright, while Korede ran for the basin. Mama Bisola's breath was coming too fast now, then not fast enough, her chest laboring like something inside it was collapsing. We have to go, Yuanda said. Korede was already at the door. I'll get a bike. No, get Musa next door. He has the wheelbarrow. Korede vanished. Yuanda wrapped her mother in a shawl and kept talking because silence felt like surrender. Stay with me, Mama. Stay with me. Look at me. Mama Bisola's eyes fluttered half open. Don't talk. Too much. Yuand bit down so hard on the inside of her cheek she tasted blood. Within minutes, 2 neighbors were helping lift Mama Bisola onto the borrowed cart. The road to the clinic felt endless. Potholes jarred her mother's body with every turn. Korede ran alongside, one hand gripping the edge, as if his strength alone could keep the night from swallowing them. By the time they reached the emergency entrance, Yuand was shaking. Nurses moved quickly. Questions came faster than answers. A form was thrust toward her. A deposit was demanded before full admission. How much, she asked, breathless. The nurse told her the number might as well have been the moon. Yuanda stared. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake. I can pay part now. That is the emergency stabilization fee. Only the nurse said, not unkindly. If you want treatment to continue, the full deposit must be made tonight. Tonight. Of course, money was always most urgent when pain was deepest. Korede looked at her with terror too young for his face. What do we do? Yuanda's hand closed around the cloth purse beneath her wrapper. She already knew the answer inside it. Not enough. Not even close. Her mind flashed to the card in her pocket. Tunda Afolayan. Call that number directly if your mother's condition worsens. She could feel the edges of the card through the fabric. But pride rose like a wall. No, not pride. Fear. Because once you accepted help from a man like that, your life could stop being yours in ways you did not understand until too late. I'll find it, she said. Korede grabbed her wrist. How I said I'll find it. And because desperation makes fools of even the dignified Yuanda, ran to the one place she had sworn she would never run again. Jeed. The restaurant glowed like a jewel in the night. Glass walls, valet parking, polished floors, laughter soft and expensive. Everything about the place seemed designed to remind poor people that they did not belong near it unless they were serving someone. Yuand arrived breathless, sweat-soaked, and wild-eyed from fear. The guard at the entrance blocked her immediately. Reservation, I need to see someone. Then call him. It's an emergency. He looked her over. Her wrapper, her sandals, her desperation. And something cold entered his face. Madam, step aside. It's about my mother. Step aside. Yuanda tried to move past him. He caught her arm. Hard. Inside the foyer, laughter drifted from the dining room, and then, as if cruelty itself had perfect timing, Jide appeared. Morayo was on his arm, gold at her throat, silk against her skin. That smooth smile women wore when they had never had to bargain for medicine in their lives. Jide saw Yuanda and stopped. The surprise on his face lasted half a second before contempt replaced it. "What now?" he asked. Yewande ignored the humiliation burning up her neck. "I need my money." Morayo gave a soft, amused gasp. "Your money? The money he owes me?" "He owes." Jide looked around, aware now of curious eyes from nearby tables and staff. "This is not the place. My mother is in the hospital. That is unfortunate." The words hit like a slap. Yewande stepped closer. "Jide, listen to me. You used my name. You know what you took. Give me what is mine." Morayo pulled out her phone. Yewande noticed too late. "Recording. Of course." Jid lowered his voice, but cruelty sharpened it. "You show up here looking like this, making accusations in public, and you expect me to hand you money? I expect you to return what you stole." That word made his face darken. Around them, conversation had thinned. Morayo tilted the phone slightly for a better angle. "This is unbelievable," she said with a laugh. "She really came here to beg." Yewande turned toward her. "Stop recording." Morayo smiled wider. "Why are you shy now?" Jade stepped in before Yewande could answer. "Not to protect her, to manage appearances." "Enough," he said. Then to Yewande with a false patience that made her skin crawl. "Whatever happened between us is over. Do not come here and embarrass yourself. My mother could die tonight." For the first time, silence touched the scene. Just 1 second. One tiny chance for decency. Jide looked at her, at the panic in her face, at the tears she was trying not to let fall, and chose himself. "That is not my responsibility." Yewande felt the floor vanish beneath her. Morayo let out a soft laugh behind the phone. "You heard him," Yewande whispered. "You would let her die." Jide's expression hardened like stone. "Leave. I helped you when you had nothing, and I owe you nothing now." The guard moved closer. Morayo's phone remained lifted, capturing every shattered piece of the moment. Yewande understood then that there are some deaths more final than the body. Whatever faint illusion of humanity she had once attached to Jide died in that lobby. She stepped back on her own, not because they were stronger, because she refused to let them watch her fall another second longer. She turned and walked out before her legs could give way. The city outside was loud, bright, merciless. She did not cry until she reached the hospital gate. Korede met her there the moment he saw her face. "You didn't get it." She shook her head once. His shoulders dropped. Then they both heard footsteps. A nurse was hurrying toward them. Family of Bisola Akinola Yewande spun around. "Yes." The nurse checked the paper in her hand. "Your deposit has been cleared. Full emergency admission approved. The patient is being stabilized now." Yewande stared as if the words were in another language. "What, the bill has been paid?" "By who?" The nurse glanced at the form. "It says private sponsor." Yewande's hand flew to her pocket. The card was still there, warm now from her skin. Korede looked from her face to the card she had not yet removed. "Is it him?" Yewande could not answer. Because at that exact moment, across the dim hospital parking area, a black car idled beneath a dead street lamp. And though the windows were tinted dark, she knew. He had not just sent help. He had stayed to make sure it arrived. Yewande did not sleep. Even after Mama Bisola had been moved out of immediate danger, even after Korede had finally drifted off in a plastic chair, with his head bent at an angle no neck should endure, even after the corridor outside the ward had fallen into that eerie hospital quiet that never truly felt quiet at all, Yewande remained awake. The business card lay in her palm. Tunda Afolayan. The name no longer felt like rumor. It felt like a door standing open in the dark, and she did not know whether stepping through it would save her life or change it beyond recognition. At dawn, a nurse returned with an updated prescription list and a more detailed cost estimate. The words blurred after the first 2 lines. Specialist review, further tests, monitoring, possible long-term treatment, money again. Always money. Yuanda pressed her lips together and nodded as if she understood everything. She thanked the nurse, waited until she left. Then she went into the hospital bathroom, locked the door, and finally let herself lean against the sink. Her reflection looked older than she remembered. Smoke-stained scarf, tired eyes, cracked lips, shoulders held too stiffly for too long. She looked like a woman trying to stand with both hands full of water, knowing sooner or later something precious would spill. She reached into her pocket. The card waited. She stared at the number for so long it began to feel ridiculous. Men like Tunde Afolayan did not hand out direct lines to women like her. Men like him had assistance layers protocol gates built from people and power. Yet he had looked at her in the market and spoken as if the distance between their worlds did not matter, or as if it mattered very much. Before she could think herself out of it, Yuand dialed. It rang once. Twice. Then a calm male voice answered. Good morning? Not an assistant, not a receptionist, not a guard. Tunde. Yuanda's mouth went dry. This is... Yuand. I know. The answer was quiet, simple, and somehow more unsettling than if he had pretended otherwise. She tightened her grip on the phone. The hospital said the bill was paid. Yes. Why, there was no pause on his end. Because your mother needed treatment. That is not what I asked. This time he did pause, but only for a beat. No, it is not. The bathroom suddenly felt too small. Yuand lowered her voice. I do not understand what you want from me. Come and see me. Her eyes narrowed. Where I'm sending you an address. No. His tone remained even. No, I'm not someone you summon. There was the faintest hint of something in his voice then. Not irritation. Respect, perhaps. Or surprise that she still had enough fire left to challenge him. Good, he said. Then let me ask properly. Will you come and see me? Yuanda closed her eyes. She thought of Mama Bisola in the ward. Korede sleeping hungry in a hospital chair. Jide's cold face in the restaurant lobby. Morayo's phone lifted in amusement. The loan documents. The bill quietly paid in the night. The black car under the dead street lamp. This had already entered her life. Refusing to look at it would not make it disappear. When she asked, in 2 hours, the call ended with no dramatic flourish, no manipulation. She could point to, nothing she could use to reassure herself that she was right to mistrust him. That was what made it worse. Tunde never sounded like he was forcing anything. He sounded like a man who simply assumed reality would eventually catch up to what he already knew. 2 hours later, after leaving Korede with strict instructions and asking a neighbor woman at the hospital to keep an eye on Mama Bisola until she returned, Yuand stood outside a tower of black glass and steel so polished it looked untouched by dust, rain, or ordinary struggle. She had passed buildings like it before, never entered one. The security guards at the entrance were dressed better than most men she knew. The lobby gleamed with marble and muted light. Even the air smelled expensive, cool, filtered untouched by frying oil traffic fumes or human desperation. Yuanda became painfully aware of her plain dress, her worn sandals, her hands roughened by hot pots and detergent. At the front desk, a woman in a tailored suit looked up. Yes, Yuanda forced her voice steady. I'm here to see Mr. Afolayan. The receptionist's eyes flicked once over her appearance. Professionally neutral, not kind, not cruel, just trained. Your name, Yuanda Akinola. The woman typed something. Then her expression changed instantly. Yes, ma'am. Please take the private elevator to the 30th floor. Yuand stared. The receptionist stood. Someone will receive you upstairs. Ma'am. Private elevator. Someone will receive you. Nothing about this felt real. The lift rose so smoothly she barely felt it move. Her reflection in the mirrored walls followed her upward, looking increasingly like an intruder. When the doors opened, a man in a fitted navy suit was already waiting. Miss Akinola, he said. This way. He led her through a corridor lined with abstract art glass walls and silent efficiency. Men and women at desks looked busy in the careful way of high-level offices, but Yuan still felt their eyes follow her after she passed. Not because she imagined it, because people always noticed when someone from the wrong side of society appeared in places built to exclude them. At the end of the corridor, the assistant opened a set of double doors. Tunde stood near a wall of glass overlooking the city. From up there, Lagos looked almost calm. Distant roofs, slow ribbons of traffic, hazy blue horizon. The city that had bruised Yuanda her whole life now lay spread beneath him like a map. He turned as she entered. No surprise crossed his face. He looked as if he had already seen this meeting in his mind and was only waiting for the physical version to arrive. "You came," he said. Yuanda remained standing near the door. "You paid the hospital bill." "Yes. You had me investigated." "I did. At least you admit things directly. I find it saves time." His honesty irritated her more than denial would have. She took one step forward. "Then save me more time." "Why are you doing this?" Tunde gestured toward the seating area. "Sit. I'll stand." Again that flicker in his eyes. Respect, interest, something measuring her and finding what it expected. He inclined his head once and remained standing too. "Fine," he said. "Your mother's illness is real. Your debt problem is real. Jide's connection to that debt is also real." Yuanda's pulse spiked. "You can prove it." "Not all of it yet. Enough of it. How I have resources. That is not an answer. It is the only one you need for now." Yuanda's jaw set. "Then maybe I'm leaving for now." She turned half away. His next words stopped her cold. "Jide is not the real problem." She slowly faced him again. Tunde walked to his desk, opened a dark folder, and placed several documents on the low table between them. Loan records, company names, land transfer notices, a photograph, another photograph, pages stamped and signed. Some names meant nothing to her. One name meant too much. Morayo's father. Yuanda stared. Tunde's voice stayed level. "Jide is greedy, vain, and reckless, but he is not clever enough to build something like this alone." She looked up sharply. "What is this A chain?" He tapped the papers once. "Debt traps, property seizures, shell agreements. Quiet intimidation. Small people get crushed first because no one notices when they disappear financially. Families lose homes. Records get changed. Signatures move. Those with enough influence wash their hands and call it business." Yuanda felt the blood drain from her face. "Our house," she whispered. Tunde watched her carefully. Yes, her father's coughing fits. Her mother's sleeplessness. The sudden notices. The men who came speaking big grammar and false sympathy. The day their belongings were dragged outside. The collapse that followed. The burial that came too soon after. It all seemed to rush back at once. "That was years ago," she said. "And patterns like this survive because people think old pain has expired." Yuande's throat tightened. "Why are you involved?" For the first time since she entered the room, something unreadable crossed his face. Not weakness, not guilt exactly. Something heavier, more controlled. "Because pieces of this network brushed against one of my companies," he said. Quietly, I started pulling threads, and found me. And found your name where it should not have been. Silence stretched. Yuand looked again at the papers. A few words kept pulsing through her mind. "Your name where it should not have been." Her voice came out smaller now. "Why would they use me? Because you were vulnerable. Because no one expected you to fight back. Because poor women are often treated like blank space people can write on." The sentence hit too close to the bone. Yuand folded her arms across her chest, holding herself together. "So what now? You expose them. You hand this to the police, I will. But not yet." The answer made anger flash through her grief. Not yet, no. My family was destroyed. I know. My mother is sick. I know. My ex used my name. His fiancé's family may be tied to what happened to us, and you're telling me to wait. Tunda stepped closer, not enough to threaten, just enough that the air changed. I'm telling you, he said, that frightened people make mistakes when they believe something valuable has slipped out of their control. Yuanda stared at him. Then came the sentence that split the room in two. Marry me tomorrow. For one full second, the city outside disappeared. The office disappeared. The grief, the debt, the hospital Jide Marayo, all of it receded under the sheer violence of that one impossible statement. Yuanda laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. She actually took a step backward. What Tunde did not move. Marry me tomorrow. Her voice rose. Have you lost your mind? No. You pay my mother's bill, drag me to a tower, show me documents about the people who ruined my family, and then what you think I'll become your wife because you asked in a calm voice. His expression did not crack. No. I think you'll refuse unless I tell you enough truth to understand why. Then start talking. He held her gaze. This marriage will protect you publicly, he said. It will force certain people to react too quickly, and it will place you where they can no longer treat you as disposable. Yuande's heart hammered. She searched his face for mockery, manipulation, pity, anything that would make him easy to reject. But Tunda Afolayan looked deadly serious. And that frightened her more than if he had smiled. For a long moment, Yuand could only stare at him. The city beyond the glass remained bright and indifferent vehicles moving in tiny lines far below, as if ordinary life had not just been split open by 6 impossible words. Marry me tomorrow. She wanted to laugh again, or slap him, or demand to know whether wealthy men entertained themselves by building elaborate traps for poor women with too much pride to beg and too little power to refuse. Instead, she said the one thing that felt steady enough to hold. Explain. Tunda did not rush to fill the silence. He moved back toward the low table, gathered the papers into a cleaner stack, and slid a thinner file toward her. Read. Yuand did not sit. She opened the file, standing. The first page was a property transfer summary from years earlier. The address made her stomach tighten immediately. Their old neighborhood. Not their exact house yet, but close enough that the memory arrived with full force, men in pressed shirts. False smiles, stamped notices, the sour feeling of adults speaking in legal language designed to confuse the desperate. The second page held names. Companies. Shell entities, intermediaries. One was linked to a real estate holding group, another to a logistics subcontractor, another to a consulting firm. On their own, the names meant little. Together, arranged in a chain, they became something colder. A system. Yuanda flipped another page, a highlighted signature, then another, then a bank authorization containing a number she recognized before her mind fully accepted it. Jide. Her fingers went still over the paper. Tunda's voice remained quiet. He was never high enough to create any of this, but he was useful. Men like him always are. Yuanda kept reading. There were payment records tied to small facilitation jobs. Identifications. Courier transfers. Meetings. Nothing grand enough to attract headlines, but enough to show a pattern. Jide had served as a runner-fixer, front-face messenger, someone ambitious enough to do dirty things for a chance to sit near powerful people and greedy enough not to care who got crushed beneath the arrangement. Then she saw Marayo's surname. Not on every page, not directly, just enough. A board seat here, a family-linked trust there, a contract route passing through a company once chaired by her father. Another company now controlled by an uncle. It was not the blunt proof of personal guilt. It was worse. It was proximity wrapped in influence, the kind that made wrongdoing hard to pin down and easy to benefit from. Yuanda looked up slowly. You're saying Marayo's family was part of what happened to mine? I'm saying the network that profited from your family's ruin overlaps with the network that elevated Jide. Why would they care about us? We were nobody. Tunde met her gaze. That is exactly why. The words landed heavily, because people like her family were easy to erase, poor enough to intimidate, isolated enough to discredit, tired enough to surrender. Yuanda swallowed and looked back down. Near the back of the file lay photocopies of old identity forms, one copy of her signature from years ago, another copy altered, another tied to a restructuring request on the fraudulent debt. Someone had been using fragments of her life like spare parts. Her breath turned shallow. "My father," she whispered. "He always said something about those papers felt wrong." Tunde said nothing. She continued almost to herself now. "He kept telling my mother that men do not hurry poor people unless there is more buried under the ground than dirt." Memory flashed. Her father refusing to sign too quickly. Strangers returning again and again. The pressure growing. The threats disguised as advice. Then the sudden collapse, legal notices, debt claims, forced movement, and afterward the sickness that took him before the family could recover. Yuan shut the file. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear but from the sheer violence of belated understanding. All this time, she said, I thought Jide only betrayed me because he wanted Morayo's world. He did want her world, Tunde replied. But men like Jide rarely change in essence. They only upgrade the scale of their selfishness. Yuan let out a hollow laugh. That sounds like you've studied men like him for a living. Tunde's mouth barely moved. In my position, I've had to. A silence passed between them. Yuan looked toward the city, then back to him. And you want me to marry you because the moment our names are publicly linked, every person involved will react. That is strategy. She snapped. Not an explanation. It is both. No. She stepped closer. It is the part you say when you want something difficult to sound necessary. I asked why marriage? Why not lawyers? Why not security? Why not hide me somewhere if protection is all this is? His face did not harden, but something in it sharpened. Because security without status still leaves you vulnerable. Because legal action without timing warns them. Because hiding you treats you like prey. He paused. And because if I put you beside me openly, they will reveal more trying to understand why. Yuan stared at him. So I'm bait. No. You just described bait. I described leverage. That is a cleaner word for the same thing. For the first time, a faint breath left him that might almost have been frustration. You are not a sacrificial piece in somebody else's game, Yuan. If you were, I would have approached you differently. She folded her arms. How reassuring. He let that pass. Your ex humiliated you publicly because he believed two things Tunde said. First, that no one powerful would ever stand beside you. Second, that shame would keep you quiet. This marriage destroys both assumptions at once. Yuanda hated that the logic made sense. She hated even more that part of her wanted it. Not the marriage, the reversal. The look on Jide's face when certainty failed him. The collapse of Morayo's laughter when the woman she recorded like a joke stopped being socially disposable. That desire unsettled her. Because revenge was a flame. It gave light. It also consumed what held it. She lifted her chin. And what do you get? Tunde answered too quickly for the question to be new. Access. Pressure. Time. Not enough. He held her gaze. She saw then what many people probably missed. His control was real, but it was not effortless. He chose it, built it, wore it, which meant it could cost him something. Yuan pressed further. Why me specifically? You could protect me without putting your own name in this. Men like you do not marry for tactics, not unless there is another layer. Stillness. Then Tunde walked to the window and looked out over the city for a few seconds before speaking. My father signed into one of those chains years ago. Yuande's breath caught. He turned back, not knowingly into the worst of it, not into the full shape it later became, but enough. Enough that when I started tracing the network, our name appeared near the root of one branch. The room seemed to tilt. Yuand said nothing. Tunda continued, each word measured. I am not responsible for what happened to your family, but my family's power was used in ways that helped create the conditions for it. I won't insult you by pretending that means nothing. There it was. The missing layer. Not just strategy, not just protection. Debt. Moral inherited unbearable debt. Yuandu took a step back, then another. So this is guilt? No, it sounds like guilt. It is responsibility. Convenient distinction. His eyes darkened slightly. Maybe. But I know the difference. Yuanda could feel fresh anger rising now, not at Jid, not at Morayo, but at the universe for arranging cruelty with such precision. The man who had shown up like rescue was tied, however indirectly, to the wound she had been bleeding from for years. You should have said that first, she whispered. You would have walked out before hearing the rest. Maybe I should still walk out now. You can. That stopped her. Not because the words were dramatic, because he meant them. No pleading, no pressure, no rush to trap her inside obligation. You paid my mother's bill, Yuande said. That already changes the balance. Yes. So if I say no, what then? Tunde's reply came calm and immediate. Your mother's treatment continues. Korede's schooling remains untouched. The investigation continues. And you walk out with the file. She searched his face for deception. Found none. That did not make him safe. It made him more dangerous. Men who lied were easier to fear. Men who offered real choice could not be dismissed so neatly. Yoanda looked down at the file again. Her own life broken into evidence. Jide's name, Morayo's links, her father's instinct confirmed too late. The debt, the hospital, the years. When she asked quietly, tomorrow. She almost laughed again. You never do anything slowly, do you know? Do the people around you always obey this quickly? They usually try. That earned the smallest, most unwilling flicker at the corner of her mouth. It vanished immediately. What kind of marriage? She asked. A legal ceremony first. Public enough to be seen. Controlled enough to be managed. And after the truth begins to move faster. That is not what I meant. Tunda understood. She could see that he understood. He answered carefully. After I do not touch what you do not willingly give. The sentence settled into the room between them. Yuande studied him for a long time. Then she asked the question that mattered most. If I do this, do I remain myself or do I become another thing rich people use? Tunde's voice lowered. If you do this, Yuanda, the first thing that changes is that nobody uses you without consequences again. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Alive. Outside, the city carried on beneath the glass. Inside, Yuand felt her old life still pulling at one arm, while something vast and unknown took hold of the other. She had come into the tower as a food seller, with hospital fear in her chest. Now she was standing in front of a billionaire with a file full of buried truth in her hands and a marriage proposal that felt less like romance than a fuse being lit. And the most terrifying part was this. For the first time since her family began falling apart, saying yes no longer sounded impossible. By noon, the city had found out. Not all at once. Not through one clean announcement. News like this never moved neatly. It slipped through assistants and stylists, through event planners and drivers, through one shocked cousin, telling another through bloggers who lived on scandal and women in salons, who trusted no silence that involved the rich. Tunda Afolayan was getting married, and the bride was not a senator's daughter, not a socialite, not an heiress, not a woman from the polished circles that usually orbited men like him. She was a roadside food seller. By 3 in the afternoon, Yuanda's face had begun appearing on gossip pages next to blurry photos taken from the market. By 4, someone had stitched those images beside the cruel clip Morayo recorded at the restaurant entrance. By 5, the city was feasting. The beggar girl who trapped a billionaire. From smoke and stew to silk in one night. Who is Yuanda Akinola really? Every headline carried a lie disguised as curiosity. Yuanda sat in a quiet dressing suite inside one of Tunde's private residences and stared at a phone she barely understood how to hold properly anymore. The comments came faster than breath. Some were disgusted, some were jealous, a few were strangely tender. Most were vicious in the casual way crowds became vicious when they smelled a woman being judged publicly. Gold digger, opportunist, seductress, nobody. Village girl, actress, liar. Yuande set the phone face down on the table and pressed her fingers to her temples. "Don't read more," said the woman pinning her hair. Her name was Amaka. She was elegant, practical, and clearly used to wealthy chaos. Nothing in her expression suggested pity. That helped. "They're not saying anything new," Yuande muttered. Amaka adjusted one side of the veil. "New words are not required for old cruelty." The sentence lingered. Yuande looked at herself in the mirror. She almost did not recognize the woman there. The dress was not loud. Tunda would never have chosen loud. It was clean, structured, graceful, expensive, in the way only the very rich could afford to be quietly. The silk followed her frame without swallowing it. Her hair had been braided and crowned with pearl pins. Her skin glowed under soft light. Even her hands, roughened by years of work, had been treated gently enough that they no longer looked like evidence. She looked beautiful. That frightened her, because beauty could become another costume, another way society dressed a woman before deciding whether to forgive or despise her. Behind her, the room door opened. Amaka turned first. "Sir." Yuanda looked up into the mirror and saw Tunde standing at the threshold. He wore black. Of course he did. Not glossy black, not theatrical. The kind of black that made a man look carved out of certainty. His suit was immaculate, his posture calm, his face unreadable, except for the briefest pause when his eyes found her reflection. Amaka, who had been composed all morning, smiled very slightly. "I'll give you a minute." She slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. Tunda stepped fully into the room, but did not come too close. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "You should not have been given access to the press feeds." Yuanda almost laughed. "You say that like your whole city hasn't already decided what I am. My city decides many things incorrectly." She turned on the stool to face him properly. "This is normal for you, no? Then why do you look calm? Because panic is rarely useful." That answer sounded exactly like him. Controlled, dry, unhurried. Yuan studied his face. "And are you calm?" His gaze held hers. No. That surprised her enough to quiet something in her chest. He continued before she could respond. "Today matters. I don't treat important things casually. Important things, not strategic things, not public things." Something in the phrasing warmed her before she could stop it. Yuan looked away first. "Your people hate me already. Some of them. Same difference." "No," he said. "It isn't." She looked back at him. Tunda moved closer now, just enough to place a velvet box on the dressing table. "If anyone makes you feel small today, remember this. Their approval is not proof of your worth, and their contempt is not proof of your shame." Yuan blinked. He rarely spoke in long lines. When he did, every word seemed chosen twice. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "You talk like someone who learned that painfully." His face changed just a little. "I did." Before she could ask what that meant, a knock sounded at the door. One of the staff announced it was time. The ceremony was not enormous. Tunda had promised controlled exposure, and he had meant it. The guest list was powerful rather than huge board members, selected business partners, a few society figures, a handful of journalists who had been carefully managed, and family members whose reactions would spread farther than any crowds. Still, when Yuan stepped into the hall on her mother's borrowed courage and her own shaking legs, it felt like the whole country had turned to look. The venue glowed in gold and white, fresh flowers, candlelight, polished marble, musicians playing softly in one corner. Security so discreet it was almost invisible unless you knew how to look. Yuanda knew how to look now. Tunda stood at the front near the officiant, one hand at his side, expression steady. But when she entered, something in his gaze sharpened and fixed. He did not smile widely. That was not his nature, yet the intensity of his attention wrapped around her more securely than a smile could have. For one dangerous second the room disappeared. Then whispering surged. She heard fragments as she passed. "That's her. She's prettier than the video. She looks too composed. How did he even find her?" This won't last. Yuande kept walking, head high, shoulders back, step after step. Every instinct from her old life told her to shrink under judgment. Today, she refused. At the front row, Madame Ronca sat draped in wealth and disapproval. Her face was elegant and frozen. Beside her, two other older women exchanged careful glances that carried the weight of entire family histories. None of them smiled. But Yuand also saw Korede. He sat in a suit slightly too large for him, jaw tight with fierce pride. Beside him, Mama Bisola, still weak, but stabilized enough to attend for a short time, held a handkerchief to her mouth and wept quietly. Not from shame. From disbelief. That nearly broke Yuand. She held herself together by force. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke. Names were said. Vows were repeated. Questions were asked. Responses given. Yuanda heard her own voice as if from a distance. Clear, steady, strange. When Tunda said "I do," he did not sound romantic. He sounded certain. That somehow meant more. Then came the ring. His fingers were warm when they touched hers. Brief, respectful, deliberate. The hall exhaled as if it had been holding its breath. It was done. At least legally. At least publicly. At least in the eyes of every witness who would carry the story out into the city like fire through dry grass. The applause had only just begun when the disturbance started. Voices at the entrance, sharp movement, a woman gasping. Then a male voice, loud and furious. "This wedding is a fraud." Yuande turned. Jeed. Of course. He stood at the doorway in a dark suit he had clearly chosen for effect. Moreo beside him in pale gold and diamonds, her face sharpened into outrage for the benefit of every camera now pivoting toward them. Security moved instantly, but Jide had already succeeded in what he came for. Every eye in the room had shifted. Moreo lifted her chin. "You people can't be serious." The murmurs swelled. Yuand felt her stomach drop, but only for 1 second. After that came something colder, clearer, not fear, recognition. This was who they were. Even now, even here. They would rather burn down a room than let her stand in dignity inside it. Jide pointed straight at Yuand. "That woman was begging me for money less than 24 hours ago." A few audible breaths swept the hall. There he snapped, turning to the guests. "There is your truth. She's a desperate woman who found a richer target." Moreo stepped forward, just enough to be seen by more cameras. "I tried to ignore her before. I really did. But this is embarrassing for everyone." The cruelty in her tone was smoother than Jeed's, but no less vicious. "She has always known how to perform innocence," Moreo added. "If Mr. Afolayan has been manipulated, then people who care about his reputation should be worried." Security reached them. Tunde lifted one hand. They stopped. That tiny movement changed the room more effectively than shouting ever could. He stepped away from the altar and faced Jide fully. When he spoke, his voice did not rise. It cut anyway. You were not invited. Jide laughed. Too aggressively. I'm here as a concerned man who knows exactly what kind of woman you just married. Tunde's expression did not alter. A woman you publicly humiliated in a market. A woman you denied while using her name. A woman whose desperation you helped create. The last line hit harder than a slap. Jide's face changed. Just for a second. There. Yuanda saw it. The first crack. Morayo's eyes flicked toward him in warning. Tunde took one more step forward. The room had gone completely silent now, hungry for blood revelation, scandal, anything. He gave them none of the theatrics they expected. Only precision. You came here to humiliate her again, he said. Instead, you've given witnesses one more record of your character. Jide scoffed, but the sound lacked shape. You have no proof of anything. Tunde turned slightly. One of his aides approached and handed him a slim envelope. He did not open it. He simply held it. For a man with nothing to hide, Tunde said, You seem very nervous around paper. A ripple moved through the guests. Morayo's composure finally flickered. Jide's mouth opened, closed. And in that suspended second, with the entire elite room watching him unravel one layer at a time, Yuand realized something electrifying. For the first time since Jide entered her life, he was the one standing on unstable ground. Jide had always been most dangerous when cornered. Yuande knew that long before the guests in the wedding hall saw it. She had seen the pattern in smaller rooms, poorer clothes, earlier years. Whenever truth came too close, he did not retreat. He shifted, changed shape, rewrote the story fast enough to make other people doubt what they had just witnessed. He did it now. The shock on his face lasted only a breath. Then his mouth twisted into a laugh that was almost convincing. Paper, he said, spreading his hands. So this is what rich men do when they make foolish decisions. They wave envelopes and hope everyone claps. A few uneasy smiles flickered in the room. Not agreement. Nerves. Morayo recovered faster. She stepped closer to him, chin lifted, elegance pulled tightly back over panic. This is beneath us, she said coolly, though her eyes remained fixed on the envelope in Tunde's hand. Mr. Afolayan, if you want to marry a stranger from the roadside, that is your business. But don't drag respectable families through the mud to justify an impulsive mistake. Respectable families? The words hit Yuande like grit in the teeth. There it was again. The old trick. Dress cruelty in class. Hide rot behind manners. Speak softly enough, and people might call it refinement instead of violence. Yuande's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Tunde, however, looked almost bored. Respectable, he repeated. Morayo's expression hardened. Yes. Tunde handed the envelope to one of his legal advisors without taking his eyes off her. Then I suggest you ask your father whether he still prefers that word to indictable. The hall changed temperature. It was not dramatic in any visible sense. Nobody screamed. Nobody fainted. But power had its own weather, and it shifted now. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. The journalists in the back sharpened like blades. Even the musicians in the corner had gone utterly still. Morayo's face drained. Jide turned toward her too quickly. What is he talking about? She answered too slowly. Nothing. Too slow, too thin. Tunde let the silence expose them. Yuande watched something extraordinary happen in real time. For perhaps the first moment in their relationship, Jide looked at Morayo not with desire or ambition, but with suspicion. And Morayo noticed. That small fracture mattered. It mattered because rotten alliances survived by shared arrogance. The moment fear entered, loyalty began to splinter. Madame Ronka, seated in the front row, rose with offended grace. Tunde, she said sharply, this is a wedding, not a tribunal. He turned to her at once. His voice remained respectful, but it did not bend. It became a tribunal the moment uninvited people arrived to publicly insult my wife. My wife. The words struck Yuande unexpectedly. Not because they were tender, because they were firm, protective, public in a way that could not be undone. Madame Ronca's eyes moved to Yuand, cool and appraising. And are we meant to accept that this woman has brought no chaos into this family? Yuande felt the sting, but before she could answer, Tunda did. No, he said. You are meant to accept that chaos was already here. Most of you simply preferred not to notice who it crushed. That landed harder than anything said so far. A board member near the back coughed into his hand. One of the older women beside Madame Ronca looked away. The truth about elite spaces, Yuande was beginning to learn, was that many people inside them were not innocent. They were merely practiced at remaining adjacent to ugliness without letting it stain their clothing. Jida took a step forward, voice rising now. This is absurd. You don't know her. I do. Yuand finally spoke. No, she said. The word cut across the hall more sharply than she expected. Everyone turned. Jide stared at her. Yuanda lowered the bouquet onto a chair beside her and stepped away from the altar line. Her heartbeat was wild, but her voice, when it came, was clear. You know the version of me you used, she said. You know the woman who sold her earrings to help you register for your course. You know the woman who hid food for you when you said you were too ashamed to eat in public. You know the woman who believed you when you promised that success wouldn't change your heart. The room had gone so quiet that every syllable felt amplified. Jide's jaw tightened. Yuand. No. You don't get to interrupt me now. That shocked him more than Tunda's envelope had. Yuande took another step forward. You stood in my mother's doorway once with rain dripping from your shirt and asked me for one more chance. You said nobody had ever believed in you the way I did. I believed you. That was my mistake. Morayo's mouth hardened, but Yuand kept going. You called me desperate yesterday, but desperation is not what made me help you. Love did. Desperation is what made you borrow another person's name because your own couldn't carry the weight of what you were becoming. A collective murmur moved through the guests. Jide's face darkened instantly. That is a lie. Then deny it under oath later, Tunda said. The line hit like a stone through glass. Morayo snapped toward him. You think intimidation makes you right? No, Tunda replied. Evidence does. He nodded once to his advisor. The advisor stepped forward and quietly handed copies of a single document to 2 senior legal observers and 1 visibly alarmed board member. No public reading yet, just placement, just enough to create dread. Jide noticed and lost another layer of control. This is harassment, he said. You can't just fabricate. Stop, Morayo hissed under her breath. He turned on her instantly. Stop. He just accused your family in front of half the city, and shouting will help. The exchange was small, but everyone saw it. A crack becoming visible. Yuande watched them, and felt something shift inside her, too. For years, Jide and women like Morayo had seemed larger than life because they were cruel with confidence. But confidence, she realized now, often relied on stage lighting. Change the light, and ordinary corruption looked much smaller. The officiant had stepped discreetly aside. Security remained still at the edges. No one wanted to be the first to move. The spectacle had become too valuable. Then Mama Bisola coughed. It was not a loud sound, but to Yuand, it cut through everything. She turned instinctively. Her mother sat pale and weakened, one hand pressed to her chest, Korede already crouching beside her in concern. In a single instant, all the glitter of the hall dropped away. This was the real thing. Not gossip, not revenge fantasy, not social war. Family. The woman who had suffered quietly while powerful people played with paper and property. The boy who had learned too early that dignity did not protect poor people from humiliation. Yuanda crossed the space at once, kneeling beside her mother. Mama. I'm fine, Mama, Bisola whispered, though she clearly wasn't. Her eyes, however, remained focused not on her own discomfort, but on Yuand's face. Stand. Yuand blinked. What? Stand up! Mama! Stand up, child! The authority in the older woman's thin voice stopped her. Yuand rose slowly. Mama Bisola looked past her toward Jide and Morayo. Illness had stripped flesh from her, but not force. When she spoke, the whole front half of the room leaned unconsciously closer. "I was there," she said. Jide's expression changed. Morayo's too. Mama Bisola continued, breathing carefully between phrases. "I was there when that boy came to my house with empty pockets and hungry eyes. I was there when my daughter fed him from pots she cooked with her own hands. I was there when she sold the last jewelry her father left her because Jide said it would help him stand." She inhaled painfully. "And I was there when he stopped coming around the day richer people opened their gate. No one moved. No one dared. You ask this room to doubt my daughter," Mama Bisola said. "But I watched her keep a family alive while some of you used shame like perfume and called it class. That line did what no legal threat could have done. It shamed the room. Not everyone. Not equally. But enough." Even Madame Ronke went still. Yuanda's throat tightened so sharply she could barely breathe. Jide, however, was no longer capable of hearing dignity. Fear had gotten inside him now, and fear turned men like him reckless. He pointed toward Mama Bisola with open anger. "That old woman is sick. She'll say anything." The sentence was dead the moment it left his mouth. Yuand saw it. Tunde saw it. The guests saw it. Morayo saw it too, and the flash of fury she threw at Jide was almost more venomous than anything she had directed at Yuand. "You fool," it said without words. Tunde did not raise his voice. He did not need to. That he said will be the last thing you say in this room. Security moved immediately this time. Jide resisted on instinct. "Get your hands off me!" Morayo pulled away from the guard who approached her. "Don't touch me." Tunde's gaze remained on Jide. "You wanted witnesses. Now you have them." Jide was being escorted backward toward the doors, but he threw one last look at Yuand, furious, humiliated, disbelieving. "This isn't over." He snapped. Yuando met his eyes with a calm she had earned in pain. "No," she said. "It's just no longer yours." The doors closed behind them. Only then did the room release its breath. But the wedding hall was not healed by their removal. Something deeper had been exposed, not just Jide and Morayo's cruelty, the rot beneath the polish, the way whole classes of people were expected to suffer quietly until powerful men decided otherwise. Tunde turned to Yuand, not to the guests, not to the press, to her. He stepped closer, voice low enough for only her to hear. "Are you all right?" Such a simple question. After everything. Yuanda looked at him and realized the harder battle had not even begun. Because outside the hall, Jide was dangerous. Morayo was angry. The city was watching. Tunde's family was divided. And somewhere behind the spectacle lay a truth even uglier than public humiliation. But for one suspended moment, she was no longer the girl kneeling in the dirt beside spilled food. She was standing, and everyone in that room had seen it. The city did not sleep after the wedding. It multiplied. By midnight, clips from the confrontation had spread across every platform that fed on scandal power and public humiliation. The first wave of headlines focused on the obvious, the billionaire CEO, the roadside food seller, the ex, who crashed the ceremony and was thrown out. But by dawn, the story had changed shape. Now the questions were sharper. Why had Tunde Afolayan confronted Jide so directly? What was inside the envelope? Why had Morayo looked afraid? What exactly had been hidden behind that marriage? For the first time in years, the truth was chasing the people who used to chase others, and fear made them sloppy. At 6 a.m, Tunde stood in the private study of his residence, already dressed, already working, already receiving updates from lawyers, investigators, compliance officers, and security heads. A wall screen glowed with timelines, account links, property records, and flagged communications. Several phones vibrated at once on the desk. Yuand stood near the window, still in a simple morning robe, watching the machine move. This was his real world. Not the ceremony, not the silk, not the quiet vows. This, precision, networks, pressure, timing. She had slept less than an hour, but exhaustion had burned itself into clarity. There was no going backward now. Whatever this marriage had begun, it had also triggered something larger than scandal. It had forced movement, and movement in rotten systems always shook loose what had been hidden. Tunda ended one call and turned to her. Morayo's father tried to contact 2 board members before sunrise, he said. He's afraid. Good, Yuanda replied. Tunde studied her for a second. Jide also tried to leave the city. That pulled her attention fully. What, he was stopped? Yuand stared. You had him followed, I had him watched. There's a difference, is there? Yes. The answer was so calm that under other circumstances it might have made her laugh. Today it only made her realize how far beyond ordinary life this battle had moved. One of Tunda's legal advisors entered the room carrying a folder and a tablet. We have confirmation, she said. One of the former clerks is willing to testify if protection is guaranteed. Yuanda's pulse quickened. A witness, the advisor nodded. He handled part of the restructuring chain years ago. He says the signatures were altered after the original transfer notices were filed. He also says Jide acted as courier for unofficial cash movements tied to forced property pressure. There it was. Not rumor, not instinct, not pain looking for a face. Proof. Yuando sat down slowly. For one moment, all she could see was her father at the old table, staring at papers too polished to trust. Her mother folding clothes into sacks after the eviction notices. Korede crying into a torn school shirt because he did not understand why they had to leave. The years of shame. The hunger. The debt. Jide's smirk. Morayo's phone. Every humiliation now connecting backward into a design she had not been allowed to see. Tunda came closer, but not too close. He had learned her boundaries quickly. There will be a formal internal hearing today, he said. Board members, legal observers, selected press. Enough exposure to prevent quiet burial. Yuanda lifted her eyes to him. And you want me there? Yes? Not because it would look good, because it mattered. She nodded once. Then I'll be there. By noon, the board hall of Aphalayan Group had become something halfway between a corporate tribunal and a controlled public reckoning. Long glass walls looked out over the city. Journalists were seated in a restricted section. Senior legal observers reviewed files. Security remained discreet, but unmistakable. At one end of the room sat Morayo's father, no longer regal, only tense. Morayo herself looked pale beneath immaculate makeup. Jide looked worse. For the first time since Yuanda had known him, he did not appear polished. He appeared cornered. His tie sat slightly wrong. Sweat had darkened the edges of his collar. He kept trying to recover arrogance, but it slid off him now and then, revealing panic underneath. Yuanda entered beside Tunda. Heads turned instantly, but unlike before, the gaze that followed her had changed. Not softened, not fully, but changed. The room no longer looked at her like a joke. It looked at her like a factor. That was enough. The hearing began with documents, then timelines, then account trails. An investigator walked the room through the layered structure. Land seizures disguised as distressed transfers, intimidation through fraudulent debt assignment, identity misuse, shell entities linked through family and associates, payout patterns, suppressed complaints. Names that once carried untouchable confidence were now spoken into microphones beside transaction records and sworn statements. Morayo's father objected twice. A lawyer overruled him twice. Then came the witness. The former clerk was thinner than Yuanda expected. Nervous. Sweating. But once he began speaking, the room changed again. Yes, signatures had been altered. Yes, poor families had been pushed deliberately because they lacked legal defense. Yes, certain files were redirected through people who could not trace them back upward. Yes, Jide had carried cash and papers under instruction. Yes, one of those cases involved the Akinola family. Yuanda did not realize she was gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles hurt. Jide snapped before anyone questioned him directly. He's lying. The witness flinched. Jide half rose from his chair. He'll say anything to save himself. Tunda did not look at the witness. He looked at Jide. Sit down. Jide ignored him. This is a setup. You married her and now suddenly all this appears. You think people can't see what this is? At last, you understood. The room quieted instantly. Her voice, when it came, was not loud. It did not need to be. What is it, Jide? She asked. Say it clearly. He turned toward her, breathing hard. You want me to say it? She continued. That I was useful when I was poor and invisible, but suspicious the moment someone powerful believed me. Jide said nothing. Yuanda took one slow step forward. When my mother was sick, you looked at me and chose cruelty. When my family was drowning, you used my name like scrap paper. When I fed you, you called it love. When I needed truth, you called me desperate. Her eyes never left his. So no, this is not a setup. This is consequence. The word struck the room like a bell. Morayo finally cracked. She turned sharply toward Jide. Why didn't you tell me all of it? Jide stared at her in disbelief. All of it. Your family was in this too. The room erupted. Not loudly. Worse. In gasps, whispers, half-risen bodies, frantic, note-taking council murmurs, camera movement. Morayo's face emptied. Her father's shoulders collapsed by half an inch. And just like that, the last illusion died. They were no longer a united front. They were individuals trying to outrun blame from inside the same sinking structure. The rest moved quickly. Suspensions, emergency compliance votes, referral to external authorities, asset freezes tied to relevant internal contracts, public disclosure language approved on record. Jide tried one final time to salvage himself. He turned not to lawyers, not to Morayo, not to Tunde, to Yuanda. His voice changed, then becoming softer, almost pleading, searching instinctively for the old version of her that once mistook need for sincerity. Yuanda, you know me. She looked at him steadily. That sentence might once have broken her. Now it only clarified everything. No, she said. I knew the man you pretended to be. He lowered his eyes first. Security approached. This time he did not resist. Morayo remained seated, stunned into stillness, as legal counsel closed around her father. She no longer looked elegant. She looked what she had always feared becoming exposed. By evening it was over. Not every court battle. Not every legal consequence. Those would take time. But the silence was over. The protection of status was over. The lie that poor people had no memory, no voice, no standing, that was over too. The sun was setting when Yuanda returned to the small outreach kitchen she had quietly rented with Tunde's help 3 streets away from her old market. Women from the neighborhood stood around stainless tables learning inventory pricing, safe food handling, and cooperative bookkeeping. Some were widows, some single mothers, some simply one emergency away from collapse. Korede was there, proudly labeling dry goods like he had been appointed Minister of Logistics. Mama Bisola sat in a chair near the doorway, weaker still, but smiling in a way Yuanda had not seen in years. Tunde arrived without ceremony. He stood beside her in the warm, orange light, hands in his pockets, looking at the room rather than at himself inside it. This is what you wanted, he asked. Yuanda nodded. Not revenge? Not only that. He glanced at her. She continued, I wanted no woman standing over a pot to feel like poverty made her disposable. For the first time that day, something in Tunde's face softened fully. And us, he asked quietly. Yuanda turned to him. The easier answer would have been instant forgiveness. The dramatic one would have been rejection. Real life offered neither. You began with half-truths, she said. Yes. You entered my life carrying protection strategy. And guilt, yes. But when truth became expensive, you still stood on the side of it. He held her gaze, said nothing. Yuanda let out a slow breath. I can't promise everything at once. I'm not asking for that. She looked at the women in the kitchen, at Korede laughing over crooked labels, at her mother alive, at the evening sky above a city that had once watched her kneel in dirt. Then I can promise this, she said. You'll get honesty from me, and a real chance. That was enough. For him, she could tell it was more than enough. Outside, the city still buzzed with the scandal of the billionaire and the food seller. Inside, something quieter and stronger had already begun. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue fantasy, a rebuilding, and this time it would stand on truth. After everything, Yuan's story was never really about marrying a billionaire. That was only the moment the world finally stopped looking down and started paying attention. The deeper truth was, this dignity does not come from wealth status or the approval of cruel people. It comes from who you remain when life gives you every reason to harden, lie, or give up. Yuanda survived humiliation without losing her conscience. She faced betrayal without becoming bitter beyond repair. And when justice finally came, she did not use it to become cruel like those who hurt her. She used it to heal, to protect, and to open doors for others. That is what made her powerful. Not the ring, not the headlines, not the man beside her, her character. And maybe that is the real lesson. Some people laugh at you when you struggle, because they think struggle defines your worth. But time has a way of exposing character. Those who use others eventually stand in the ruins of their own choices. Those who keep their integrity often rise in ways nobody expects. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments. Do you believe karma always finds people in the end? And what country are you watching from? If you enjoy emotional stories with deep twists, justice, and healing, subscribe and stay for the next journey.